Hello all, my name is BJ Maley and I'm a member of the Daniel Webster chapter, as well as the Chicago and West Suburban alumni chapters. It's my privilege and pleasure today to introduce our next speaker, Brother Sam Amirante. Sam is a member of my chapter, the Daniel Webster chapter, having attended law school at Loyola University of Chicago. During law school, he was also a police officer, and after law school, he joined the Public Defender's Office, where he aided in the defense of a large number of underprivileged criminal defendants. Upon entering private practice, he was tasked with, as one of his first cases, mind you, the defense of one of the nation's most notorious serial killers, John Wayne Gacy. And I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about that today. Later, he became a Cook County judge, presiding over hundreds of cases, both jury and non-jury, and subsequent to his retirement from the bench, re-entered private practice, where he continues to practice in the state of Illinois. I first met Sam when I was a student at Loyola University, because he was always available to us as an alumni member of Phi Alpha Delta, and even I remember distinctly him coming to speak at our spring banquet my senior year, talking about his experience in his cases. I also remember reading an article about him in the Chicago Tribune while I was a third year at Loyola, where the columnist described him as the hugging judge because of his unique approach to reaching out to his juvenile defendants and helping them reunite with their families and appreciate those family bonds that would help them stay out of trouble. Again, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Brother Sam Amirante, who has served as a member of the Illinois State Bar Association, the Northwest Suburban Bar Association, the Italian American Bar Association, the Illinois Judges Organization, and many other fine organizations, including Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity. I hope you will all take an opportunity to read his book on John Wayne Gacy and give him your rapt attention as he speaks to us today. Thank you. Here's Sam.
Hi, I'm not used to giving a talk over Zoom in these modern times. I'm used to looking at the crowd out there, and I guess some people would get nervous looking at the crowd. I kind of enjoy seeing the crowd of people out there and getting to see what people are looking, what they look like in their eyes, to see if I'm being interesting or boring or whatever, and kind of switch topics. So it's all kind of new to me. If you see my background, I'm home. You may hear my dogs barking from one time or another, but I want to thank you. First of all, BJ, thanks for that very nice introduction. I'm very humble and I'm honored to be here today. This is quite a wonderful thing for me to do. I'm sitting in my home in Barrington, Illinois, which, by the way, good morning to some of you and good afternoon to some of you. But I'm sitting here in my home, and it was a dream. I live in Barrington Hills, Illinois, and it was a dream when I was a little boy living on Taylor Street, the old Italian neighborhood in Chicago, Little Italy. I used to wake up in the morning and hear my mom listening to a show by Howard Miller. Howard Miller was in talk radio, WIND in Chicago. And I used to hear my mom would say, "Oh, that Howard Miller," we had this little apartment, and my mom would say, "Oh, that Howard Miller, he's rich. He lives out in Barrington Hills with the white fences and the horses and all those things." And I would think when I was a little boy, 5 years old, think someday I'm going to live in Barrington Hills. I'm going to live in Barrington Hills, Illinois. And here I am. It took me 68 years and then some to finally move out here, but I was able to do it. So it was like a dream come true for me, little Sammy on Taylor Street. And now to be able to speak to brothers, and I don't know, in this day and age we see brothers and sisters. I don't know how to address that, but it's really an honor to speak with you and to be asked to do this today. As you can see, when I was a little boy living in this wonderful country we live in, I've been very idealistic. And I carry those ideals with me to this day. I've done it on both sides of the bench. I was a public defender, as BJ said. I was in private practice. I went on the bench. And after I retired from the bench 15 years ago now, I went back into private practice. And I love doing what we do. I love being a lawyer. I love going into court and defending people. I love advocating for somebody's rights. I love advocating for what is right. And I enjoy doing it. as I'm sure all of you do. In this, I've always been like that, but in particular, I met a young lawyer who's probably out there somewhere. I can't see all the participants, but and I don't know if I should stand or sit. Anyway, John Corelli, who was I was at Loyola, and John was there as a justice. I don't know if he was regional justice or whatever his title was at the time, but he came to Loyola, and I was this young Italian kid again, and he went up bringing salami and gabagool and cannolis and all these things to Loyola, and it really impressed me that this guy was so down to earth, and I decided to get involved in Phi Alpha Delta, and I'm so glad I did because I've made so many lasting friendships throughout the years. Again, it's just really an honor to be here today. Now, you want me to talk about John Gacy, about the case that I had in the book I wrote, and I will do that. And the way I'd like to do it is, and for those of you who have read the book, I apologize if you've read the introduction. For those of you who haven't, I'd like to read the introduction and the prologue. My wife tells me she never reads the prologue of a book, and I say it's so important, probably the most important part of the book that I wrote, John Wayne Gacy, Defending a Monster. And it's very appropriate for what's going on today in this crazy upside down world that we live in. And I'd like to just kind of bore you for a minute and read the prologue of my book, for those of you who have not read it, because this is what it's all about. This is what we as lawyers, that's why we do what we do. And I will read this. It says, in 1770, when this country was in its birth throes, the most hated man in America was a man named Captain Thomas Preston. He was the commander of a small cadre of British soldiers who fired upon a gathering of disgruntled colonists, killing 5 of them. This event came to be known as the Boston Massacre. The 5 men who died as a result of this event are considered by most historians to be the first casualties of the Revolutionary War. As is always the case, there are 2 sides to the story as to why this tragedy occurred. The colonists, led primarily by Sam Adams, one of the most outspoken writers and revolutionaries of the day, claimed that the British fired upon a peaceful crowd and killed 5 patriots without just cause. The British soldiers claimed that they had fired upon an angry mob in self-defense. There are 2 reasons that will cause good men and women to abandon their long-standing, dearly held morals, values, and principles and revert to more primitive, barbaric practices to resolve conflict. That is when their hearts are filled with anger or when their hearts are filled with fear. Because the colonists were angry over taxes imposed by the British without representation, along with other perceived injustices, and because they were fearful of the sheer might of the British Crown in general, and of the soldiers that now were being billeted in their town to quell potential uprisings. In particular, their hearts were filled with both anger and fear. They wanted revenge against the British captain and the British soldiers under his command. Evidence be damned, facts be damned. They wanted revenge that was swift and sure. They wanted the heads of the captain and his men on a spit. One man came forth. He probably was a P.A.D. I don't know. One man came forth and said loud and clear, quote, "I stand for the law," unquote. The man that took the soldiers' case when no other man would stand in their defense was John Adams. John Adams, one of our nation's true founding fathers, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, our first vice president, and our second president of the United States, a man of principle. He was also Sam Adams' cousin and friend. John Adams, his response was said to be this, Quote, counsel is the last thing an accused person should lack in a free country, unquote. He agreed to defend these men in spite of what it might do to his reputation, to his law practice, to his future plans. He took the case because he believed that free men had certain rights. These were among the heartfelt principles on which he built his life. Those principles are woven into the fabric of our Constitution. Those principles represent our principles as Americans. Every person accused of a crime shall have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury. Every person so accused shall have the right to face his accuser in a court of law. Every person so accused shall have the right to counsel. Many men and women have fought and died to preserve those principles and those rights. So keep in mind, folks, that when you hear someone say that this crime is too gruesome, or this person is too dangerous, or this issue is too complicated to allow those principles to stand, and that includes the frightened flock that today seeks to exclude terrorists from those principles. Keep in mind that the very men that John Adams defended were uniformed members of an army of a foreign power that would soon become our enemy. Still, they had their day in court. There is no just cause to usurp the Constitution. Remember the words of Judge Louis Garipple, who was a judge in the Gacy case, when he said through tears of pride, quote, what we do for the John Gacy's, we will do for everyone, unquote. I will serve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That is the oath we ask our president to take, together with every other person in public service. Every member of our military takes that oath. Every lawyer, every one of you takes that oath. Every American citizen lives by that oath. It does not say, I will serve, protect, and defend the popularity polls, or the will of the people, or the frightened masses. It does not say, I will serve, protect, and defend the Constitution unless. There are no conditions. There are no qualifications. When harried and nervous people jump in front of microphones and scream and rail that we should suddenly do something in direct contravention to that upon which we have based our very system of justice, when they tell you that we should abandon that which men and women have fought and died for, and which has worked so well since the beginning of this beautiful experiment that we call America, in favor of that which we have always criticized about lesser countries. And my advice to them is kindly pound sand. So anyway, that's the beginning of my book, and it segues into the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution. As you all know, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to speedy and public trial, an impartial jury, blah, 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 and assistance of counsel. And then it segues into the first chapter, which says, Sam, you do me a favor. That's how the case started with John Gacy. That's how my book starts. And I read that now to you because in these trying, difficult times we live in our country, and frankly, the whole world right now, I think we always have to remind ourselves as lawyers that we folks are that buffer. We are that buffer between tyranny and freedom. And we always have to realize that, acknowledge that, not give in to any popularity or unpopular things, and realize that we as lawyers are there to defend and protect our Constitution, the Constitution of the United States, and we take an oath to do that. And I know all of us, particularly in Phi Alpha Delta, honor that oath and respect that oath and respect the Constitution and the country in which we live. So I wanted to mention it because times are so rough right now, and there's so many different conversations going on all over our country. And just ironically enough, I wrote this book about 10 years ago, and I put that in there, but I think it's very apropos to what's going on in so many of the situations we have in our country right now. Now, about John Gacy, what the BJ didn't tell you is that, I'll stand up here for a second. You can't really see how short I am, but I'm 5'2", and before the Gacy case, I was 6'4", and this is all that's left of me now. So now see, it's hard to tell now. Usually, if I see a whole crowd out there, I can hear you laughing and going, and I can't see or hear anything. So I don't know if that was good or not, but that's one of my favorite lines. I tell everybody I was 6'4" before the Gacy case, and there's only 5'2" left of me now. I faced some some wonderful lawyers in that case: Bill Kunkel and Terry Sullivan, Jim Varga, Bob Egan. They were representing the state. Bernard Carey was the state's attorney at the time, and it was a very, very good group of lawyers. It's funny because when you go through a case like that, it's like going through a battle. I'm sure many of you have been through those tough litigation situations where you fight like cat and dog with the other side, but then when you're done, you remain good friends. It's part of being a lawyer. Part of being a lawyer, we go in there, we fight hard, like you would in any competition, in any battle, going to trial. But you know what? You don't hold it personally. And fortunately, none of the lawyers involved in the Gacy case ever held anything personally against the lawyers on the other side. We fought. People, the jury thought we hated each other. They thought Kunkel and I were going to go to blows a few times during the trial, but you know what? Bill and I actually both became judges ultimately, and we're good friends to this day, even though the perception was, and rightfully so, that we were bitter enemies during the trial. We had opposite sides to talk about. Our position was that Gacy was insane, was mentally ill. As a result of that mental illness, he was not unable to conform his conduct to the requirements of law. He could not appreciate the criminality of his act, and therefore he was legally insane. That was our defense from day one. The state's the prosecution's position was he was not mentally ill. He was not insane. He was able to appreciate the criminality of his act because he hid his bodies. He didn't. He did not do it like a guy like Hinckley, which was the classic defense where he shot the president based upon an obsession for Jodie Foster, and he didn't care if he did it in front of the entire world or who saw him. So he was textbook insane. Where John Gacy, on the other hand, hid his crime. He buried the bodies in a basement. He ran out of room in the basement, and or not the basement, but the crawl space, and he started throwing the last 5 bodies into the Des Plaines River. He was getting more and more careless as he was going along, but he did hide the bodies, and that was Bill Kunkel's position. That was Terry Sullivan's position. That Gacy knew exactly what he was doing, and he was an evil person. So the issue in the trial was evil versus insane. And it was a very difficult road for us, of course, but I believe if we put all of the facts into the computer and the evidence into a computer, which who knows where we're going, we may be coming to that someday. We could have a computer here instead of a live jury. But if we put all those facts into a computer, we really believe that we introduced and proved that Gacy was insane, and the state did not come back and prove that he was sane. But the jury, of course, accepted the state's argument, and they found John Gacy guilty. And it was really kind of disheartening to me as a lawyer because I think they came back in 2.5 hours. It was like long enough for them to sign the verdict forms after an 8-week trial and all the evidence that they heard. So it was really, really difficult. And some things came out during the trial that, like one of the psychiatrists blurted out, we were hoping to have John Gacy committed, put him in an institution where he could be treated, where he could be studied to prevent future incidences, serial killers doing this again. They listened to our argument. But one of the psychiatrists blurted out during his testimony, he might get out. So the jury was afraid. We were afraid that Gacy might get out someday. And the whole idea was to have him live in a structured environment, because as long as he was in a structured environment, he was not going to repeat any of his crimes. But if he was taken out of that structured environment, he would have repeated it. If Gacy ever got out of jail, he would have killed again. He would have killed again, because he just couldn't control himself. And when I talk to kids, and maybe when I talked in law schools, like BJ said, I tell people the scariest thing about John Gacy was that he wasn't scary at all. He was not scary at all. He could be your good neighbor, your next door neighbor, your friend. It could be he could be somebody in your family, a brother, an uncle. It's just the scariest thing was he was not a scary person. He was kind of a happy-go-lucky, jolly person, quite different than the perception that the media has created for him as being. And in my book, where I call him Defending a Monster, which I explained throughout the book, that he was not a monster. He was a human being, and every human being in this country deserves a vigorous defense. And he wanted his story told, and that's what we did in this book. We told his story along with my story as the lawyer defending somebody like that, the lawyer participating in a case like that. I kid around about being 5'2" now after being 6'4" before Gacy, but you know what? It takes a lot out of you. We worked on that case, 20 hours a day for 15 months, day in and day out, and it never stopped working. But am I? Again, I'm not used to the. I've been in Zoom meetings, but I don't know about speaking. Am I supposed to be taking questions or questions and answers right now? Somebody tell me, PJ.
Hi, Sam. This is Emily. Yes, we do have time for some questions, and I understand that there are a few queued up. So I will ask our International Marshal, Nicole Gritta, to present the questions we've received so far that you can answer. Attendees, please feel free to message your questions to me or to Nicole, and we will ask Brother Sam. So Nicole, take it away.
Good afternoon, Nicole Gritta, International Marshal, Sanford Chapter. Thank you, Brother Sam. You have a question from Kristen Holvoit. Actually, two questions. Her first is, do you have any advice for law students venturing down the defense attorney path? And then her second one, how do you navigate the emotional stress and burden of disturbing crimes?
I'm sorry, what was the second part?
How do you navigate the emotional stress and burden of disturbing times? Or disturbing crimes, sorry.
So those are very good questions. The first part, I never, I didn't intend to become a criminal defense lawyer. And what I advise law students and college students I speak to and other students and my own children, you follow your heart, you do what you want to do. My heart, when I was a young boy, again, living in the old Italian neighborhood, was to go on and be successful doing something. Nobody in my family had graduated college. I was the first person to graduate high school and college. But I always was idealistic. I used to love stories about Abraham Lincoln and Clarence Darrow, and I wanted to do things that always make the world a better place. I can tell you, and I've maintained those ideals. And what I tell young people is to just maintain your ideals, whatever it is. Just try to make the world a better place. One of my favorite movies of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. You talk about navigating through criminal things, cases like this, and difficult times in life. You have to look at that George Bailey and what he was going through and the difficult times of his life, and everything worked out well for him. It's just a story, but you know what it shows us is that each one of us, no matter where we come from, no matter who we are, no matter what status or strata or whatever we're in, each one of us as a human being, when we're born, we change the world. Every one of us affects everybody else in the world. And so I'd say now that we can't have more social togetherness and personal touch. BJ said it was called the hugging judge. Hugging's important. Being close are important. And I advise young people to do that. To just do what they think is right to make a positive impact on, if not their little world around them, on the entire world. A positive impact, because everybody's here. Everybody, no matter what, in one way or another, we really do affect the whole world. So I advise him that. Now, again, going back to what I was going to, as far as being a criminal lawyer, my dad didn't want me to be a lawyer because he thought all lawyers were corrupt. He was a truck driver, newspaper truck driver. He thought lawyers are corrupt, and he didn't really he didn't have a lot of respect for attorneys. But he would say, Sam, if you ever went to politics, be a diplomat. Don't be a politician. Be a diplomat. And always talk from the heart. And he really was sincere and cared about that. But he said, don't be a lawyer. Be a doctor. And here I was, and so I listened to my dad. I went into pre-med at Loyola, and I did well. I worked at a hospital. I worked at Resurrection Hospital for 4 years while I was in college. And then I took the MCAT, the Medical College Admissions Test. My undergraduate was in biology. Took the MCAT, and I got the worst grade in the history of the Medical College Admissions Test. I mean, literally. I think it was scored up to 800 at the time, 200 to 800. I think I got 201. So I just was not meant to go to medical school. I was disappointed, discouraged, but you know what? Like the Frank Sinatra song says, you get up and you wipe yourself off, you keep on going. So I decided to join the Marine Corps. This was after having led a peace march down Sheridan Road from Loyola to Northwestern University, a candlelight peace march during the Cambodia bombings, all that stuff. And I led that. And a few months later, I found out I was going to get drafted. My draft number came up real low, and I joined the Marine Corps with two of my fraternity brothers. And it was probably one of the best things I ever did. It settled me down, and it was a wonderful, a terrible experience and a wonderful experience at the same time. But anyway, after the Marine Corps, I decided, because I always wanted to do it, to take the law school admissions test. Took the LSAT, and lo and behold, without ever having a pre-law course, I scored like in the 96th percentile or something. It's like, wow, this is what I always wanted to do. So I applied to Loyola in Northwestern, Chicago, and Loyola gave me money. So I decided to stick with my alma mater, and I became a law student at Loyola. Met John Corelli, I think, my freshman year, who was very active in P.A.D to this day. And I was a really conservative guy. I was always more suited. I wanted to take the side of the prosecution and all that during the, I had been in between the Marine Corps. I had been a police officer for a little while too. So I wanted to take the side of the prosecution, very conservative. Because I was Italian, I used to get, my fellow students used to tease me I was a mob lawyer. I was going to, I was one of these mafia lawyers and all that. And it was all kind of laughable. And then when I got out, I worked for a personal injury lawyer. I was going to go into personal injury work. My background in biology and all these different things. And I worked for a lawyer, John Phillips, is a very, very good lawyer, huge ego. He's passed now. He was very successful personal injury lawyer, but it was real difficult working for him because I wanted to be a trial lawyer in my own right. It's difficult having two big egos in the same office. So I decided to leave. I was his clerk. He wanted me to go with him, and graduated from law school and wanted to be a trial lawyer. And one of the other lawyers, and I tried to get a job for the state's attorney's office. I didn't have any, I didn't know any politicians. I didn't have any, in Cook County, what they called at the time, clout to get into the office, influence. I didn't have that. I was a kid from Taylor Street. So somebody said, go, I couldn't get in the state's attorney's office. Somebody said, go in the public defender's office. Public defender? I don't want to be a PD. They want to burn down all the jails. They want to, they're all hippies. They want to let all these criminals out. And so I was looking around for work, and somebody said, no, there's this guy, Nunzio Tisci, really nice Italian guy. He's in the office. Go see him. I went to see Nunzio. I went up applying for the PD's office, and without ever wanting to be a criminal defense lawyer, went over there. I got assigned to Nunzio in his department in the office, and we got into court right away, and I started winning some cases. And we started arguing, and I enjoyed that. And it was wonderful. And when we win, it was euphoric. I mean, it was absolutely euphoric. And I was defending the Constitution, and it became a wonderful thing. And I fell in love with it. So that's how I became a criminal defense lawyer. And then my first case, I'm sort of like Forrest Gump too, because things just fall in my lap. My first case in private practice, when I left I finally decided to leave the PD's office, I get a call from who? John Gacy. He was a Democratic precinct captain. I was a precinct captain in the same Democratic organization. And by the way, now I've turned Republican, but that's another long story. But I was a Democrat in the same organization. And he says, Sam, can you do me a favor? I said, sure, John, no problem. What do you need? He said, the Des Plaines police are tailing me, and I don't know why they're tailing me. They're ruining my business and everything. You find out. It's my first case, private. I said, John, sure, absolutely, I could find out. Anyway, the rest of the whole story's in the book, but that's how I became a criminal defense lawyer. When Gacy, lawyers start referring cases to me. So do I advise kids to go into that area? No, I advise them to follow their heart. And if you follow your heart, you do the right thing, and you have the right attitude about things, everything will fall into place for you. And, you make a difference in so many people's lives, and you help the little world around you in so many ways, and the bigger world around you. And that was also the nice thing about becoming a judge. Those of you who might be judges or might be aspiring judges, the nice thing about being a judge is you get to do something. Abraham Lincoln Marovitz told me one time, you get to be doing something good for somebody every single day of your life on the bench. Whether it's helping the community, put a bad guy in jail, whether it's helping a young kid straighten out his life, whether it's being compassionate to a complaining witness, or just being fair to litigants on both sides, being fair to lawyers. You get to do something good every single day of your life on the bench. And that's what I've been able to do in my life, and that's what I advise young people to hopefully aspire to. As far as getting through bad times and bad crimes and bad situations, it takes strength. I think it takes fortitude and courage. To do the right thing isn't always easy. It's tough on your family. The Gacy case alone, there was so much fallout for police officers' families and lawyers' families and victims' families that people never see in the news, that they never see anywhere. There's a lot of fallout in a case like that. And there's a lot of counseling that's needed. Divorces take place. People get heart attacks. These are all difficult times. But, through these difficult times, we as lawyers especially have to maintain our strength and our guidance of those around us, because people really look up to us to have that strength and guidance. So that's what I think we have to do as lawyers, is just keep that strength up. Yes, sir. Mr. Ross. How do I?
Okay. We have, let's see, our next, I'm sorry, Jay. Give me 1 second. We've got a queue of questions here. So I know, Sam, you've only probably got another about 15 minutes with us, so I want to get through as many as possible. All right. Okay. Our next question is from Jacqueline Blumenfeld, and her question is as follows. I would want to know how you felt about representing someone that you knew was guilty. I'm not a defense attorney, but I know a lot of attorneys who won't ask if their client is guilty or not because they do not want to know.
It's a very good question, but you know what? I have to tell you, it's probably 90% of people that, if I have to look at the word guilty or innocent, probably 90% of people that come and see me are guilty if I didn't judge them. Police officers aren't always wrong. The way I handle it, when people come into my office, and a guy like Gacy's a great example. I mean, when they come to see us, they're innocent, because the Constitution of the United States says they're innocent. The Constitution in our legal system presumes that person to be innocent of the crime. Now, whether they committed the act, did what they're accused of doing, that's perhaps some evidence or some accusation on the part of the government or the state. But when they sit before me and talk to me, they're innocent. And my job, and your job as a lawyer, is to, again, protect the Constitution and protect the rights of that accused person. And it's your job to make sure they stay innocent in a zealous, ethical, and lawful way, and maintain that presumption of innocence. Or if they choose along the way to waive their right to be presumed innocent and plead guilty, then it's your duty as a lawyer to make sure there's a factual basis for that plea, that the plea is a valid plea. But, every situation is different. Every situation is unique. But I think we always have to keep in mind what we're there. It's sort of like when a doctor people ask lawyers, it's a great party question. How do you defend that person? Person's guilty of sin, terrible. How do you defend Gacy? Doctors are in the same situation. They take the Hippocratic Oath. They're vowed. Let's say Gacy, instead of needing a lawyer, he was a serial killer, or after he was convicted, he goes to the hospital. He's having a heart attack. Do you think the doctors and nurses should just let him die because he's a horrible serial killer? No, because they are duty bound as professionals to save that person's life. And so it's not our decision as lawyers. It might be a jury's decision or a judge's decision, but as lawyers advocating for one side or the other, it is not our decision to determine what happens with that person's life. It is our decision to either represent the state vigorously and ensure the rights of the people, or the government vigorously, or the accused vigorously to protect the rights of the accused. So that's how I look at it. I look at it in a very kind of a veil over my eyes. I don't look at the person. I don't judge the person. So I hope that answers your question.
Got another question here from Brother Bill Rothman. I'm curious to know what the legal insanity test standard was and what factors in Gacy's conduct or behavior did you feel showed him to be legally insane?
Okay, there's really good, if you read the book, there's a really good multi-page write-up about that. But just briefly, the law in Illinois is still, the insanity defense is somebody is insane if, and actually I have an insanity case going on right now in DuPage County, but somebody is legally insane if, based upon a mental disease or defect, because of a mental disease or defect, they cannot appreciate the criminality of their act or conform their conduct to the requirements of law. That's the standard. If it is shown in the issues raised by the defense, if the issues raised and shown by preponderance, basically a preponderance of the evidence that the person is insane, then it becomes a state's burden to refute or rebut that evidence through their own testimony. In Gacy's particular case, we had psychologists and psychiatrists testifying to his mental illness. He was borderline personality disorder, psychotic, episodic psychotic. There are all kinds of things in the DSM. And the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual has changed over the years, but the laws remain the same. Like I say, the classic defense, insanity defense, was Hinckley, who shot President Reagan because he was suffering from neuroses, an obsession, OCD, obsession compulsion, to impress Jodie Foster. And because of that, he wanted to impress her, so he shot the president. He truly was insane. Gacy was a little more gray area because he was in and out of his insanity. And that's what the state argued. He couldn't have been legally insane because he was sane most of the times. He really, although he was suffering from a host of mental illnesses, he was encaged in his own body. He was like the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When he was bad, he was the worst of evil. When he was good, he was the best of good. He wasn't always bad, and he didn't walk around looking like a monster, looking like some psychotic person ready to attack somebody because demons are telling him what to do. He was viewed by some of the victims who we had testified in court. We had victims who were his victims who escaped from him, who testified to his insanity at the time of the attack. We had doctors who testified to his mental illness. The state, on the other hand, as in all expert situations, they introduced doctors who said he was not mentally ill, and he could appreciate and did appreciate the criminality of his act because, as I said earlier, he buried his victims. If he left the victims out in the open, if he did it in front of everybody, it might have been a different story. So, thank you.
We've got another question here. How do you handle the stress of such a high-profile trial?
You come home and start beating the wall. It just, you know what? Now I do it. I do some like fantasy baseball and things like that. So I just get my mind off everything. It helps. It helps to do diversions. Get out and run. During the Gacy case, I used to go out and run 5 miles a day, just to be away. Just by myself, go out there and run. I think exercise, meditation, all the things we learn for stress reduction, we have to do it. yell and scream if you have to. Those are all ways. And I think people even sometimes have to get counseling, talk to other lawyers. It's very difficult. It was difficult in my family. You know, I have a new family now. I wound up in a divorce situation, as many of the police officers did, and people, because you know we work hours and hours a day. It's very, very difficult on your family. So I guess the best way to handle the stress is don't do it, because it's stressful, and what we do as lawyers every single day is stressful. I said the difference between being a judge and a lawyer. All those years on the bench, I would work from basically 9 to 5. I'd go home at night, and sometimes they'd have to study things, you know, and go through it. But I would lose the stress after I left court. It's more stressful for a judge being in court because you want to make sure you're fair to everybody, both sides, lawyers, clerks, sheriffs, bailiffs, anybody who's in your court. You want to make sure you treat everybody well. You're living in a fishbowl, and there's a lot of stress for that time you're on the bench. When you go home at night, you're done. A lawyer, and you lawyers know, no matter if you have a high-profile case or a difficult case or not, we are under stress 24 hours a day. Tony, you wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweat. Oh, did I file this? Was this deadline due? Was this deadline due? Did I do this for this client, So we live under stress. And I think the best way to handle it is all the recommendations we get from people who know how to deal with stress. And that's try to do something else other than your case during the current course of it.
Thank you. We've got another question here too from Sister Carrie Smith. She says, I think your story has an interesting lesson about dealing with losses. I hate to lose, and I suspect many of us feel the same. Can you talk a little bit about the aftermath of the trial, how it affected you, and if you have any perspective on how to move on after you lose a case?
It affected me in some negative ways and in some positive ways. Negative ways as far as my practice. I told you I wanted to be a personal injury, which now actually I'm starting to do again, plaintiff's personal injury work. But it kind of put me in the area of being a criminal defense lawyer, because that's where my referrals came from. A lot of people hated me. To this day, you know, oh, you're Gacy's lawyer, and they associate you, people associate you with your client. I mean, I like to be liked, I like people to like me, and I wanted to maybe go into politics, which I did. I ran for state senator. A real positive thing was, and it's at the very end of the book, I wrote a law. This was, I always tell everybody, a silver lining behind the Gacy cloud. I wrote a law back in 1984 called the Missing Child Act of 1984. The I-Search law in Illinois. It became the Interstate Search law. It's the Illinois State Enforcement Agency to Recover Children. During the case, I looked at my own 2 boys. I had 2 young sons at the time, and I had seen the story about Adam from Florida, whose dad got involved in all this stuff. And I went to look at my 2 sons, and I started crying. I thought about what would I do if anything ever happened to one of my boys, somebody like Gacy. They got in his hands, because, it's a very scary thing. As an Italian father, my thought is I'd strangle the guy myself. I'd kill him. He wouldn't have a chance to go to trial. I mean, that's why we have laws. That's why we have courts for people like me who feel that way. But I thought, what would I do, if I couldn't get him? You go to the police. What do you do? The police would wait. At that time, 72 hours before they started looking for a missing child. There were problems. So I was sitting in court the next day after I cried watching. I started writing a law, and I called it the Missing Child Act, and it was passed unanimously by the state legislature. And what it did, it ended the 72-hour waiting period that police departments used to use before they start working on missing persons. It started a statewide central computer system and little units, groups called I-Search units, which specialized in finding lost, missing, runaway children. It has since developed into the milk thing, the law where they put it on the side of the carton, and forget the little girl's name. Anyway, the alerts that go out, that law came from that, what I thought at the time, looking at my 2 boys. So I'm very proud of that. As a result of that law, the thousands and thousands of lost, missing, and runaway children have been reunited with their families, who very well may have fallen victim to somebody like Gacy. So that's the good thing. That's the positive thing. negative thing, like I say, you don't spend a lot of times with your family. You learn the older I get, the more important it is to spend every moment with your family. What we do is important. One of the most important things in the world, one of the most important things in the country. But remember, folks, family comes first. And when you're in a big case like that, you don't see your family, and you got to really put time aside to spend time with your family, with your children, your spouses, because it really destroys a lot of families. Destroyed my first family. So
I think that's a perfect segue to what I think will be our last question, which is, how do you strike a good work and family life balance, especially when there's so much stress on both sides?
well, I think what I've learned, again, it takes a lot of time and experience. I've been doing this 45 years now, and I think you have to be able to juggle your work. You have to sometimes say, "We're done, leave it." My office now, my lawyers who work for me, and I have 4 full-time lawyers and 1 part-time lawyer who work for me, and I have to put in a schedule they call it the A-team. A-team, leave at 5 o'clock, but they don't. They're working till 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight. And then I feel guilty if I leave, so I have to stay with them. But I think we have to really, as important as the things we do, we have to realize families first. It really came home to me when I was a judge, and I was sitting in a civil court, and I was listening to these 2 lawyers drone on and on and on about these boring issues they had. And my dad was dying in the hospital at the time. And and because of my dad, because the work ethic he instilled upon me, I stayed, and I didn't want to interrupt the lawyers. I stayed, and my dad was asking for me. My mom was calling, and my dad was asking for me, and I stayed to listen to the end of these lawyers' arguments. And then I went to the hospital. When I got there, he had gone into a coma, and I held him in my arms, and he passed away. But he was awake when he called me, and I never went there. From that moment on, I thought, so important. What we do is so important, but nothing is more important than family. And for that, we have to set aside a time. We have to drop our work, as important and responsible, the responsibilities we have, and whoever our loved ones are, whether it's family, whether it's close friends, take time with them and make sure. Now I do it. Now in my old age, my experience, I drop everything and I spend time with my family and my good friends, because that's what it's all about, folks. When all is said and done, that's what it's all about. Brotherhood. It's about brotherhood.
Emily, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today to answer these questions. I mean, I know this is just absolutely fascinating, and you have so many years of experience to share with our members. So thank you very much. Everyone will virtually clap. It always looks a little weird, but thank you very much.
Thank you.